Let's call ourselves to order. Meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen, Monday, December 7th at 6:05 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. It is a Zoom meeting. The phone number to access by phone on Zoom is 646-558-8656. The meeting ID is 982-7336-7979, and the passcode is 907875. Thank you all for joining in tonight. This is going to be a great opportunity to learn what other groups in the town are trying to accomplish in the next year or so. I know as a selectman, sometimes you have to pick and choose between multiple worthy plans and objectives of people wanting to do things in the town. And I think this will help certainly the Board of Selectmen and Angus and perhaps the FinCom I think the idea is that we're going to get some synergy out of this, we should perhaps prevent some duplication of effort, and groups can coalesce around a common goal, and maybe we can accomplish things better rather than each facet of the town government working in isolation. I wish we could do this more often. It's kind of hard to do it remotely like this, but hopefully this will turn out to be a good situation. So the structure of this, we'd like to have one person from each board or commission to speak for like 3 minutes maximum. I'm going to hold up my gavel, and that 3 minutes, Angus is going to mute you. And we're not trying to be rude, but this could go on long. Everyone wants but everyone deserves a chance to be heard. And if it runs longer than that, people are going to drop off the meeting, and we're going to lose the whole concept of learning what other people are up to.
Thanks, Archie. So I will keep this, brief, but I did put together a couple of slides. So I'm going to do a screen share, but there's not a whole lot visual. So for those of you who are just on the phone, you're not really going to miss anything, but this is more just to guide the, okay, so can people see that? Okay, so I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. Can people see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so some context. We do have a decentralized form of government, and there's different venues for decision making. It's not like it's one-stop shopping where you can just, go to the selectmen or go to my office and have all the answers. There's all kinds of things going on across town. A lot of current issues, a lot of backlog issues, some with years or even decades of kind of built up interest and research. With very few, if any, exceptions, there are no unimportant issues. But of course, we can't do everything at once, so choices need to be made. That's kind of really the context for this. So the policy issue before the town is therefore relative importance and also relative urgency. Something can be extremely important, but not necessarily having to get done right away. So to set that policy direction, the organization, including its chief elected officials, the Board of Selectmen, needs an understanding of the full universe of what is or what could or should be on the table from a policy standpoint. So in my experience, I've been at this a while, there's basically 3 types of town services. Baseline services are mandated by local, state, or federal statute, regulation, or order. And this pyramid I use is to show baseline services really comprise the most of what town staff go toward. Then you got what I call value added, which is kind of the proactive planning, zoning, non-mandated services, expanding level of service. No one is making you do it. It's something because you want to, there's a community or a government want to do it. Then the third is the unplanned or the crisis. Going into any given year, it's not something you expected to put a lot of time toward, but it comes up, and when it comes up, it needs attention, typically right away. So town staffing is generally based on the capacity needed for baseline services. A lot of departments are staffed based on what it takes to perform a level of service as required by federal, state, and local law. And the largest share of staff time is definitely toward these essential functions. The next tier in terms of time spent is toward the value added, or these kind of more proactive policy and planning initiatives. But inevitably, from time to time, crises arise. And so, yeah, again, this pyramid, like the smallest category is crisis. But when a crisis arises and it demands attention, it inevitably diverts staff time and as the manager, it's part of my job to make sure that at no point are the basic baseline core services threatened. Day in, day out, come what may, town departments need to deliver on those core services. So what suffers, unfortunately, in times of crisis are the value added. And I would be the first to acknowledge that some crises are truly crises, but others, Page School flooding a couple of years ago was an example of that. Others arise due to a lack of proactive planning and anticipation. But when they come up, still can become a crisis. So part of my objective for tonight, which I believe the board shares, we need to prioritize among the universe of potential projects a shorter list that, even taken in sum, is realistic and attainable, even if it's ambitious. Anyone who knows me or my background, I'm no concern about ambition, but we do want to be realistic and attainable. Prior to making new commitments, meaning translating goals to an actual work plan, we need to identify the resources necessary to honor those commitments. To the extent any new commitments draw from finite resources, we need to ensure the capacity to carry forward the existing commitments that have already been made, including maintaining baseline services, or make the knowing decision that, okay, this new thing that's come in is more important. So even though we said last month or last week that we're going to do this other thing, we're going to move that around because it's less important than this new thing. So as long as that's knowing, that's great. But and then, of course, we want to minimize avoidable crises through proactive planning, which takes a certain amount of bandwidth to think ahead 3 or 5 years. So this is just a short summary of some known and ongoing policy initiatives. Obviously, COVID and the various paperwork, that's a huge impact. Second, financing for the water tank, the well field, the Soldiers and Sailors building, that's known, that's a big time impact, at least in my office. Regulations to govern the use of the affordable housing fee in lieu funds is ongoing. A potential land acquisition to develop over the long term a local water source. Middle Street Bridge, several stages of that still ahead of us, including working with Newbury Port. We've still got a number of financial policies from the community compact that haven't been brought through the process yet. That takes time. We definitely need to focus on enhancing our implementation of the housing production plan so we can try to get ahead of that policy issue. Page School playground, Soldiers and Sailors building, both have a number of stages ahead of us. Stormwater bylaw required by law. We have to do that this fiscal year. We have to find a way. We're working on a rewrite of the floodplain bylaw as well. And there's some interesting discussions ongoing about a potential surface water protection bylaw in conjunction with Newburyport, which could be very important. And finally, I would say, and this isn't really ongoing, but it's something we talk about regularly, at least with the Board of Selectmen, is reviewing the form of government and beginning a process to consider potential, how is our form of government working, and potential looking at a town charter. So, advancing these existing, and that's a short list. I mean, there's another dozens, but that's a short list. Advancing these known initiatives while maintaining baseline services and responding to crises, that's what keeps your town government, at least your staff, busy on a day in, day out basis. So bottom line of all this, we're all part of the same whole. To be the most effective, we need to work in coordination. So the goal is to identify some top priorities, including issues that by nature run across several areas of the organization, so we can work together to get them done. And I do have a handful of existing, what I call cross-cutting initiatives. These are things that will only get done with the dedicated, concerted attention of several different areas of the organization. And I think this is my last slide. So the first is the update of the personnel policy. While on its surface, that seems like something that's kind of a, front office type thing. To do that right involves a very meaningful process, including every person on staff, as well as appointing authorities. We have a half dozen or so different entities in town that have appointing authority, and we need to get to where we have consistency across the entire organization in terms of personnel policy and administration. So that's going to be a major effort and is a ongoing, it's just now getting started in a serious way. Second, Soldiers and Sailors Building. There was a lot of talk about, what use or uses, the communities going forward with design, with the expectation of restoring that building next summer. But we still don't know what we're going to use it for. We collectively need to figure that out. The third, pipe stave, mill pond done. There's talk of, there was work that started a little while back about the mill pond management plan. There's others suggestions I've heard about potentially reopening the CR. In general, that collection of land is a huge long-term kind of calls for like a long-term vision. And there's nowhere that's going to get done without a number of different town boards, commissions, committees working together kind of at the same time. The next one I've got public access to the Merrimack River. We have a river access committee, but this is also an area of real interest to the open space committee, to the Park and Rec Commission, as well as to the Board of Selectmen. That's something that, that's a kind of a cross-cutting issue. And the Harbor Committee is also doing work on potential mooring field. Housing planning, plan implementation, that cuts across a number of entities. And finally, this whole issue of form of government and potential town charter. That's only going to get done if we're all kind of focused on it at the same time. So that's all kind of to just preface or frame the discussion. So at this point, we want to turn it over to each of you. So let me stop there. And so I did do kind of a randomized order, but we did have a request from the Concom to go first. They have a meeting later tonight. So if we could start with the commission, that would be great.
Sure. Tom Atwood here from Conservation Commission. We also have a few other members here tonight. So to quickly summarize our memo that we sent to town manager and selectmen, we're dealing with a number of issues this year, large projects, including the Kentucky project and the Coffin Street project. Our number one objective, though, is to work on and have passed at Springtown meeting a wetlands bylaw at the local level. Many of our area towns also have this available. We do not. We think that this would greatly improve and recognize additional values of wetlands and increase safeguards for resource areas. Our second item on the list would be to get some additional hours for the conservation agent with respect to the properties that we have purchased over the last few decades. We have spent over $6 million in land since 1998. We have over 35 miles of trails, and to make sure that these are properly managed and taken care of, this requires additional hours from the conservation office. In addition, we have had the conservation agent work on things such as looking at conservation restrictions in town to determine compliance and make sure that things are being taken care of as expected. And then in the future, our last item, post-pandemic, we'd like to think out of the box and try to expand some of the things that we do with the Conservation Commission, perhaps by developing an internship program with Kentucky High School for high school students interested in conservation work under the conservation agent's supervision. And that can also be not only on trails and related work, but also on remediation of invasives and the like. So that's our list.
Thank you. Anyone wish to signal? You can go to the chat function and notify Angus of any questions.
I have a question. This is Glenn.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Tom, thank you very much. Do you have the funding already in place to be able to do that wetlands, I'm sorry, whatever you called it, and then bring it to town meeting would be first. And I should know this, but I don't. Did we give additional funds to the conservation agent to be able to do the trails already? And if we did, I know it was in the preliminary budget. I'm not sure. I should know if it made it through, but I don't at this point. And if we did, how is that working?
Yeah, we had, I believe, some limited additional hours in FY 2021, and that was for the conservation agent to conduct an annual inspection of all but one of our conservation restrictions. We have numerous conservation restrictions in town to make sure that they're properly compliant with the terms of the restriction. And he's been also documenting the conditions in order to create a baseline for future monitoring. So those are the areas that he's been focusing on, and he's been doing a great job with that. Wendy and Dawn are here as well. I saw they can comment as well if they choose.
Yeah, I can comment just a little further. The addition for this year's budget was 2 hours a week. And I think originally we had requested 5 hours a week. So I think what we're looking for is the remaining 3 hours.
Okay, how is the 2 hours working, and what have we got accomplished with that?
Well, really, with 2 hours a week, all he's been able to do is just start the preliminary, becoming familiar with the trails and walking the trails to kind of get an assessment of what their condition is. It's not enough time to actually do any trail maintenance or anything like that. So it's been useful, but it doesn't really satisfy the trail maintenance part of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
And regarding the plan, you had asked for funding on the bylaw. The bylaw is actually being written by the Conservation Commission members. So as you know, we have one member who's a lawyer, and she's been extremely helpful in helping us draft the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Angus, who's up next?
We got FinCom is next in the draw. And I see we've got, let's see, we have Nathan on and we have Joe Heyman on. Are you guys just here to listen, or do you have, which is fine. I know we have some people here just to listen, which is great.
Hi, I'll talk for a quick minute. Nathan Kelly, FinCom. I spoke with Gary, the chair of FinCom, just a little while ago, and we didn't have any particular issues. We're just more interested in hearing from everybody and getting a perspective of where the whole town is at.
Great.
Great.
The next one we had is Cable Committee. Is
Kevin
on? If not, we could get him when he jumps on. Next I had is Cultural Council, but I know Allison. I think you're welcome to present, but I think you said you might just be one to listen. And I've got you on mute. You're on mute, Allison. I don't have you on mute. I think you got to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot going on that really impacts the rest of the town, but I guess I just wanted to say that we're just looking to recruit new members, diversify the board. We're right in the middle of our grant cycle, and the deadline for artists to submit their grant paperwork is the 15th of December, and then we'll make our decisions in early 2021. The one thing actually that was brought up, which is why I'm really glad I'm listening, is a number of artists are looking for ways to kind of creatively present their projects and programs during COVID. And some of them were asking me questions about cable in West Newbury, and I have no idea how that works. So whoever is involved with that, I would love to talk to them and figure out if there's a way that, people who are receiving grant money from the West Newbury Cultural Council could utilize that to kind of broadcast their program to West Newbury residents.
If you,
That's-
Member of the committee is on
Hi, this
tonight.
is-
Glenn, do you want to speak to that?
yeah, if you could use my town email,
Okay,
and we could set up a conversation, and we can see how that. We're always looking for, especially local content on our channels. So that would be excellent. We're always trying to reach out. I'm glad that you're on. So
okay, perfect, thank you.
it's gkemper@wnewbury.org. And then we could start a conversation about that.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you very much.
Allison, I have a question. Is there a relationship between the Cultural Council and Pentucket Fine and Performing Arts?
No. They request grants. For example, what was it? In the beginning of November, they had the a cappella concert.
Yeah.
So we granted, they received a grant through the Cultural Council for part of that performance, but they're not, aside from that, we don't work with them.
Okay.
You could say they use stewardship grants that they apply for through you.
Right, yep.
So you would, who would you go to for those grants?
The state of Massachusetts, they haven't finalized their budget yet, but they, designate a certain amount to every town in Massachusetts to their cultural council. Last year, we received about $6,000.
Yeah.
And we got, I think it was close to maybe 30 applications. And as a board, we went through all of them and tried to figure out, we'd like to keep a lot of the money in West Newbury. So for example, the Merrimack Valley Concert Band, they put on a performance at the gazebo most summers. So for example, they were one of the groups that received a grant. There are a lot of grants that go to artists or performers at the library. So just, working with whatever the state gives us and trying to fully fund instead of partially fund a lot of artists or, people who submit their grants, but also trying to keep that money in West Newbury.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Who's up next, Angus?
We actually just had Kevin jump on. So Kevin, we did it by draw a straw. I actually did a randomized Excel thing anyhow, but we did have cable committee. Did you have something?
I'm
Kevin?
ready to roll. Thank you. Yeah, Kevin Bowe from the Cable Advisory Committee advised the Board of Selectmen, or basically make sure that we can broadcast the Selectmen meeting and any other municipal meetings. One initiative we hope to be looking at this year is the utilization of the PEG grant fees, public education and government fees, that every cable subscriber pays 3% of their cable bill, has been for the last few years going into a fund that pays for things like cable casting and et cetera. And there is some funds available that we want to get input from the community to potentially utilize as a community resource. So that's my summary.
And if I remember correctly, I believe
Yeah,
Kevin,
what is that
the
resource?
balance is about $140,000.
There's about $140,000, and what we had discussed last week at the Selectmen's meeting and what I had presented is hopefully in the next 30 to 60 days, closer to 30, I will be sending out, requests for ideas or input of any kind of community ways to utilize these funds. They're generally the cable access funds that other cities and towns have full-time staff, and they they loan out equipment and train community members. But, you know, to be honest with you, while $130,000 sounds like a lot of money, it's not enough to sustain something like I just described. So our challenge is how to utilize these funds, or even if to utilize these funds in something that is positive for the community, but at the same time can be sustained and can be practical. If anyone would like any more information, you know, prior to me trying to reach out, and I don't pretend to be able to reach out to, my goal is to reach out to everybody, but I might fail. My email address to get any more information, again, my name is, email address is kbowe, B-O-W-E, as in Kevin Bowe, kbowe, B-O-W-E, @kbowe.com. That's it for me.
And hopefully, I'd like to be able to set up an email through the town, which I would love to have all boards and commissions use rather than using their personal one. But I mean, this is a good start. Or they could send it to my town email address.
Okay, thank you. Who's next, Angus?
Capital Improvements Committee. Nathan, do we still have you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Nathan,
1 second. I'm
Yep,
sorry. You got me
great.
at a bad time there for one second.
Sorry. You all got to be on your toes because it might be you next.
I know. I wish we got a list of who was up next.
It-
Okay, so Capital Improvements Committee. So as far as what we have going on right now, the big thing that we're working on is trying to understand the capital needs of the whole town. So each of the members of the committee has been acting as a liaison between ourselves and a bunch of the different departments, and going and meeting with the departments over the course of the last month, and to understand the comprehensive needs of the whole town from a capital perspective, but not just in a reactionary manner. In the past, we've been very reactionary, and we want to have a complete picture so we can be more proactive of understanding of the capital needs. So that's what I would say is the big thing that we have going on right now with capital improvements. We're going through that process right now.
I would say that for those who haven't seen it, there is a really nice, it's a working draft of the capital program, but it's, if you go to the capital committee webpage, it's linked there to the left, and there's a huge amount of information there. That's going to continue to change over this next couple of months as we work toward the town meeting season. But there's a lot of great background there that didn't exist a year ago.
yeah, so if anybody has an extra 10 or 15 million dollars they just want to turn over to the town they'd really clean up that list pretty quickly. Just keep it in mind.
There you go.
All right, unless there's questions for Nathan, the Board of Water Commissioners is next.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you, Mike.
Bob couldn't make it tonight, so he asked me to chime in here. Board of Water Commissioners, two of the main things you want to do is try to secure a potential piece of property for a well field for the future of West Newbury. We've done a lot of well exploration in the 23 years that I've been here. And this is by far the best, probably could produce, 9-10 times the amount of water that we do from the existing well field right now. Of course, it's going to be expensive in how we're going to do that, and coping with all the other issues that might go along with it. But that's at the top of the list to try to get that secured. And we've been working on that for quite a few years now. Secondly is getting another water operator. As probably some of you do know, I'm really the only full-time operator now. I do get a little bit of help from the last employee that was with the water department that went over to the highway department, which is a big help. But we've been severely understaffed for water operators, and we are advertised and we are interviewing right now to try to get somebody. We actually gone out to just get a laborer and train them like we have with the last two. But of course, pay has to kind of go up, and we have to try to keep these employees from going to other towns as soon as they get trained. So we really need some help as far as backup too. You got to have adequate manpower, and we just don't have that. And those are the two major items that the Board of Water Commissioners want to tackle this year. That's it from me.
Thank you, Mike.
I have a question. Glenn? Archie?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate all the time you put in, and it's very stressful, water. It really is. But a question, since this is the day that the water bill is, so it's kind of apropos to ask this question, because I get this asked more than once and I really don't have an answer. I think people understand the needs and understand that, they need to be met. But on the backs of the water payers, ratepayers, I guess that's what we call them, it's almost impossible. So is there any other initiatives by the water department to try to have some type of other funding source, if possible, other than just the ratepayers, which I think are only basically half of the 1,700 people we have households in town?
Yeah, actually, we've been saying it for years that we need to get the tax base to help us to get through that. That's the bottom line. It's just too expensive. It's like I say, it's like me being on a town salary and buying a $3 million house that I can't do. And this is the way the department's running. And that's basically what has to happen is the tax base, and some more people have to help the water users. We just, we're building this new tank, the water tank. We built the new booster station up there. We're building new chemical building, new well to help out to try to alleviate buying some water from Newbury Port. Had source water protection conversation today, and like, if anything happens serious to that reservoir, we have no water probably, and we need to get self-sufficient. And this isn't just for now. This is not something I don't think that you're going to jump right into, because we have a lot of things going on right now. We have to do the infrastructure. We're going to start that in another 2 years, and that's multi-millions of dollars that's going to be on the water users right now. And they just really can't take any more. And I want to say that we want to get another employee right now, because the water department has basically done well exploration and capital improvements all the time that I've been here, but we haven't put anything back into personnel. But I think that the town has to get together here and help out. Water is everybody's issue, not just the Board of Water Commissioners issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
All right, next up is in the lineup is the Tree Committee.
Yeah, hi, I'm Fred Shinanya. I'm the chair of the Tree Committee. Our charter is to protect and enhance the trees and the forests of West Newbury, which it's obvious to everyone that that's one of our richest heritages here in town. And almost 60% of our town has tree cover, which is a very high amount. And our role is developing into not only education of the residents and working with the tree warden, which we've been doing a lot this past year. We have a lot of cross-cutting issues affecting other boards and committees that are going to start to unfold, if you will, especially related to our top priority, which is trying to work with the boards and committees in town so that when development occurs, there is not needless damage to trees. It's one thing to remove a tree for construction purposes, but the way construction sites are run, you do a lot of damage that will kill trees 10, 15 years in the future. So preventive measures are really important. And we're going to come out with guidance on that. That's our number one priority. Number two is to survey the residents to find out, number one, their views, and number two, what actions they'd like us to take in the future. Number three was we're going to continue to assemble the roster of significant and remarkable trees. You've seen some newspaper articles, you've seen the email blasts. It's gotten a lot of positive feedback. We have some really important historic trees. One of them, for example, is on the Coffin Street development. It's 125 years old, has incredible value both for stormwater and erosion control and so forth. And we're going to have to help the boards that are involved with that understand the value of that tree as they do their deliberations. And that's pretty much the three big areas that we're going to be doing. Longer term is some kind of, which is a more expensive budget item, is tree replacement, tree purchase and planting. And for example, at the Page School playground, the new playground. But that's where we will be trying to get grants to help us with that. The Board of Selectmen has been generous with giving us some startup funds that will be reimbursed with the state to get some equipment to start our work. But we're looking long term at trying to offset some of the loss of trees.
Thank you, Fred. Any questions about the tree committee?
Yeah, actually, I have a quick question. Fred, in the education effort, is there a focus of any sort on helping people understand what trees are appropriate to put in consideration of climate change now? You know, putting in trees that are essentially at the northern end of their range and that are likely to be survivors.
Yeah, that's already up on our website in two places. One is in the climate change tab and one is on what trees to plant. So there is some information. And there's a tool that called iTree that I'm familiar with that can really help pin that down even more. And it's a publicly available software tool that the Forest Service puts out that we can use to help homeowners.
Great, thanks.
Okay, who's up next, Angus?
Next, we have River Access Committee, and Rob, I see you're here. I know you had sent a note and said that you might not say much, you might just be here to listen, but you are next on the list.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
So there's two things going on. One is obviously the acquisition along River Road by Greenbelt that the town participated in. As it relates to the riverside of that property, they're looking to come back mid-2021 to the town to discuss further what the specs, what considerations to take in down there. So this is probably a great opportunity for the town to do something on the order of what Angus was talking about, which is, you know, you're going to have open space, you're going to have river access, you're going to have harbor, all manner. But their plan is to speak to the town first before they go to the Concom with a design. So I would hope that you know, that'll be directed to Angus and the Board of Selectmen, and then you guys will decide who should participate in the discussions with Greenbelt. They are taking up the trail section right now as we speak, and they'll be before the Concom, they hope, beginning of 2021. So the phase one is the trail side, phase two is the river side. The other thing we've been paying attention to is land along the river at Ferry Landing, which you know, we've done some title research work on, and we've determined that that the state doesn't own as much land as what we all thought they owned down there, and And I'm going to leave it at that and let Angus speak to anything beyond that. But there will be presented eventually. The plan is eventually to take up land at Ferry Landing in a manner that the town again would need, people from open space, people from river access, harbor, et cetera. Public safety, that's a very important area for the fire and rescue people. So those two things are live and really essentially what we're aware of and are waiting, to participate on further.
Archie, can I make a comment or a question, please? It's
Yeah,
Glenn.
go ahead.
The one on Ferry Landing, that would be a little bit premature to try to get people involved in that because that
Yes.
has to play out a little bit. I just want to make sure that people
Yeah.
understand that. It'd be better just to have everybody take a deep breath on that one and let us work on that. And then when it's ready, then we can bring it to the town. We're not
Absolutely.
and we're not-
Absolutely. I was just trying to point out that
I understand.
that at some point in the
I
future.
understand. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. But I just want to make sure that, and I think that's the most important. We have to make sure that it's all secure before we start thinking about, and that's all I wanted to make sure that we, all of a sudden, we're not inundated with ideas down there tomorrow.
Thank you, Rob. Who's up next, Angus?
The Board of Library Trustees. Wendy, are you speaking to that?
So any other year, but this year we'd be before you talking about floor replacement in the library, potentially development of a meeting room and our 10-hour-a-week position that we want to add. But with COVID, really our primary focus right now is the public reopening of the library. And so we've done a fair amount of research on how to do that safely. And there's really 3 areas that we need to focus on. The first is cleaning. That's one of the main criteria in our phased reopening plan. And we don't have a dedicated cleaning staff at the library. So what we've done recently is hire an outside service to come in and clean once a week. And that's just for staff doing curbside pickup. If we're going to open to the public, we need cleaning every single day and disinfection of the restrooms and so forth. So that's going to be a significant cost that's not in our budget right now. There's really no way to estimate what that's going to be until we know when we're going to reopen. Probably $550 to $600 a week would be the cost to have that kind of service. The next main item is HVAC improvements. Back in August of 2019, we were having some indoor air quality issues, and the State Department of Health actually came in and did an assessment, and they gave us 2 pages of recommendations, which together with the DPW, the library has completed almost all of them. The 2 outstanding items are balancing of the HVAC system and just an assessment of how it's working. And those are beyond our capabilities in-house. So I think this is an example of something Angus was talking about. It's a high priority, but it didn't have a high urgency. But now with the development of COVID and the fact that it's spread, through the air, this has really kind of pushed this to the front of our focus. And so what we're looking at right now is hiring an HVAC firm to come in and do a complete assessment of the equipment, how the system operates, and what improvements we could make to have it be more effective to protect the public and the staff from COVID. Hopefully from that, we'll get some recommendations that we can implement to improve the HVAC system. One of the things about making this about COVID is it makes it eligible potentially for CARES Act funding. We'd like to do this assessment before the end of the year so that it would be eligible. And then whatever improvements had to be made would have to be a separate, addressed separately next year, perhaps. The final area is just operational. We've installed plexiglass shields at the circulation desk, and feedback from other libraries and businesses is that it's hard to hear through them. So we want to install microphones, and then just some, simple signage. to direct traffic so that we can maintain physical distancing, and then also just a supply of masks and sanitizer and so forth. All of those operational things we can take care of with our existing budget. But that's just one of the priority areas that we have so that we can reopen. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Wendy.
Sure.
Any comments, questions?
Yeah, Wendy, when you, I was a little confused in the timing for the HVAC evaluation. When you said by the end of the year, I assume you mean the end of the fiscal year?
Actually, I'm trying to do it by the end of December would be ideal. I've spoken with two companies, and one company came out on Friday and spent an hour with me looking at the building and the plans and everything. So it could happen. It would be a push for sure, but.
And I will say, Rick, that's Wayne and I have been working with Wendy and Corinne on this. And if, because the urgency is driven by COVID, if the work can get done by the end of this year, there is a good chance it could be funded through the CARES Act. So
right, okay, great, good.
Part of the consideration.
So this, my next question, oh, I lost my video. My next question may not be relevant then based on the time frame, but HVAC is a big user of energy. And if there was a way to coordinate with efforts of the Energy Advisory Committee, that would make sense. Again, though, the whole timing thing may not allow that, but.
Well, I think, if based on what the recommendations for improvements are, that's definitely, energy savings would be one of the items that we want to look at. And Angus and Wayne and I spoke about that this morning. Actually, there may be grant funding available, to implement some of the recommendations for energy savings. So for sure.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, next on the list, we had Board of Health, and we didn't have anyone from the board here. But Archie, if you agree, I'll spend 60 seconds just summarizing the items in the written packet.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I met with Paul earlier today, and sorry that Bob James wasn't available, but they did. So the Board of Health, prior to COVID coming in, had been working toward implementing a new automated curbside trash and recycling program. That's going to require a lot of public education, outreach. Anytime you're dealing with people's trash, it's can get very sensitive, and also improve food waste management program. And so the Board of Health recognizes that the implementation of that is going to require, a certain amount of public buy-in and outreach. So they had been working toward doing that for FY21, then COVID hit. And so that was smartly shelved. That was not the right time to be doing that. But that is something on their to-do list for FY22. Could be not necessarily a cost savings, but a cost savings relative to what would be a larger increase if they don't make that change. So that automated curbside is their top issue. And their second, of course, is COVID. The regular updates to residents that hopefully everyone's on the email list, that you get those, and we try to get that out in various ways. Management of the issue with all kinds of follow-up. They're super busy with all of that. And the third, and this we started with a working group meeting last week and another meeting next week, is a plan to administer vaccinations. That we are on a track that would be done locally, and obviously the Board of Health would be right at the center of that. And then the third thing, which is they've made a huge amount of progress in the last 2 years, but that's continuing the monitoring and testing the results of the steel landfill as part of the post-closure plan. So those are the three big items for the Board of Health. So if there's nothing more on that, the next we had on the list is Park and Rec Commissioners. I don't believe we have anyone on there from there. Maybe we can, maybe toward the end of the meeting, Archie, we can circle back for those that we don't have presenters if a presenter arises. Let's see. Energy Advisory Committee is next.
Hi, Chip Wallace here for the Energy Committee. We met last week to discuss our priorities for the year and came up with number one, organizing it and holding an energy and environmental fair to highlight information, resources on energy efficiency, renewables, and other environmental topics that town residents would be interested in, with the goal to give people information they can use to act on their own and have a positive impact on the local environment. We anticipate that we would invite some other town committees to participate in that with us. The other priority being exploring potential new solar developments around town, especially around the municipal campus and around the Page School. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Chip. Any questions, energy related questions?
Yeah, I have one. Archie, it's Glenn.
Okay.
When you say about potential solar field, we have some serious acreage everywhere. Have you looked at, all town-owned land, or just certain spots that you think it might work?
More certain spots where we think it might work, close to electrical service, around, parking lots in the area of the 1910 building or the public safety building, for instance, or, space that might be available near the school, Page School.
Thank you.
Yeah, sort of Glenn, maybe a little additional towards your question. We have at times looked at various sites and, of course, we've demonstrated through past votes that not everybody's open to being able to see a solar panel on a nearby piece of property. So, our folks has been, or our conversation has been largely thinking of places where there would be minimal abutter pushback. And that's why, around Page School, there are very few abutting properties, and there is definitely open land. And on the municipal campus, again, there are abutting properties and users of the municipal campus. By the municipal campus, we mean the 1910 building, the annex, the public safety complex, and the senior housing that's contiguous to all that. And there are locations there where potentially significant solar could come in that would provide energy as well as secondary benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. Who's up?
I had the Carpost Building Committee, and I don't see anyone on from there. I'll just say briefly, with the project now entering the design phase, there is going to be.
Did we disband the Carpost Committee?
Well, it's
that was actually going to be
totally clear. It's not totally clear. Yes.
Well, we should tell the members because I think they feel like that their charge was over, and I heard that. I actually just heard that in the last 2 hours.
I agree, Glenn. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I think we need to talk as a selectman to reinstitute a committee to go forward during the building process to help the town out, like we've done with the Page School Building Committee when we had that $10 or $12 million thing, and the public safety. But
that was the entire issue when it came up for reappointment, was that the scope, the charge of the committee needs to change now that we're entering the design phase.
Yep.
Relative to what all the work it had done leading up. So, but I said, for instance, when I had an update on the executed contract last week or a week and a half ago, whenever that was, I said to the 4 members that I had as the committee. So, I guess in my mind they still exist, but the charge does need to be updated for sure. So I'll reach out to them and make sure that, and we'll get that on an upcoming selectmen agenda. So. Investment Policy Committee. Archie, do you want to speak to that?
The Investment Policy Committee has been, we revamped the the whole plan of the committee, and that has been approved by that was approved by the Board of Selectmen in the summer. So now there are not particular new major objectives, to be honest, other than we continually the committee evaluates the performance of the management company that deals with the town's outside investments, and we've been quite happy with their performance over the past few years. So that we don't anticipate that that changing. Having said that, we may have to abide by state bidding laws. We may have to look into whether we have to send that out for another evaluation soon. But simply that committee has been very happy with the performance of the town's the company that's managing the town's investments. So we don't invest the money. We simply evaluate how the management company is doing compared to benchmarks. The people on the committee are, not me, but the other people are very well versed in this and very happy with how things have been running. So that's where I leave it.
Are we selling high and buying low?
Absolutely.
Okay, the next I had on my list is Community Preservation Committee. I don't know, do we have someone on? Rick, you're on. Do you want to speak to that, or?
Sure. I've got to reorient my thoughts here.
Not like being put on the spot there, Rick.
Of course, I'm an ex officio member too, so.
Right. So, I mean, actually, we don't have any projects currently under consideration.
Well, I think you're asking for some. So if anybody's on here that can think of one, right?
Yeah,
you're asking, the timeline's coming up.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll be keeping our eye on the Soldiers and Sailors building, but that's really moved on to the next stage. When
is the deadline for applications, Rick?
The deadline, thanks, good point, Art. January 2nd is the deadline for applications. So there's actually less than a month till that deadline. That doesn't mean that you need to have things fully fleshed out, but you know, to get into consideration for spring's town meeting, we would need initial material by January 2nd.
Just say briefly with the CPC, they go through an exercise every year of updating the community preservation plan. And, you know, I do think in the absence of a master plan and without anything on the horizon that there's going to be a master plan, I do think that the committee, you know, we have had some good conversations in the last year and a half about some policy issues, including in the area of housing. Where there's not really a go-to place for that, and where it's a committee that's comprised of a number of different entities in town. You know, I know Leah and I we talk about like what's the right venue to talk about housing policy, not a specific thing, but like policy. And we kind of think, at least in the absence of, you know, unless and until there's something else like a housing trust, we've kind of thought of the CPC as that role. So I will say that, you know, with this year's update of the community preservation plan, we're looking to not just like update the numbers from last year, but to try to write something that's meaningful. So, you know, I do think there's some work going on to kind of bring things forward. Would you agree, Rick, right?
Yeah, I would. And, you know, there is funding available there. If we come up with a viable plan of some kind, there's some amount of funding available. And there's also an additional chunk of funding that's not related to the CPC that could also be applied towards in some fashion towards affordable housing, whether it's supportive of what's there existing, of what we already have, or potentially, although it would be a drop in the bucket, towards helping out, facilitating new affordable housing.
I think it's time to regenerate that, so whatever we need to do to get maybe even a committee together and stop.
Yeah, well, there was a committee and it was disassembled about close to 20 years ago, and it's.
I was on that committee dealing with the Mullen land, and
Yeah.
so I think everybody kind of hailed over that. So with some resurgence, some interest, I think maybe we should all take a crack at it again.
Yeah, we're kind of getting a
Committee,
peaceful
you've got the
reality
West
right now.
Newbury Housing Authority.
Say that again, Rich, please.
You have a committee. You've got the West Newbury Housing Authority.
Well, they're actually a separate entity, and they're not. I think I could say they're not officially part of town government.
But they're also not in charge of developing new projects.
They
do have a different scope of authority.
They're in charge of managing what we have already. Like that, Rick. A good example would be the apartments up at Page School. Those were owned by the town, and eventually we got the housing authority with to be able to take them over and manage them and put them in their umbrella, their budget.
Just somebody should coordinate with them.
Oh, I'm in touch with that office a couple of times a month, Rich. No, we're close coordination with the housing authority, but they're not the entity to, come up with or implement kind of town housing policy.
Yeah, for certain types of
here or in any other community in the Commonwealth, that's just not what they're charged to do.
For certain types of affordable housing, Rich, they might, for rental housing in particular, they might be very useful in managing it after housing was created, but I don't think they're in the business of creating new housing.
They don't have a way of generating the even just the funding or anything. That's not how they work. Yeah.
Hi, this is Elisa Brammer. There was a request for committees that are interested in CPC monies, and in Bob Jane's absence, I would say that the priorities of the Historical Commission are to have a phase 3 historic site survey. They've been very popularly received so far, and they are a way of preserving properties that are likely to disappear as development continues. One thing we're also looking at is expanding this to vistas and landscapes. Our second priority is to put a sign up in front of the Alms House Cemetery, which is along Poorhouse Lane, right next to the town forest. That will be the subject of the January Historic Minute series, which we are continuing next year. And ideally, it would be nice, and this would not be a very involved effort, to have that cemetery, which does have a population over 10 people, which means that under state law, it should be taken care of. Have that just cleaned out. It would basically take a truck and a chainsaw to do that. Maybe half a day's worth of work. That would be something that I think should be coordinated with the open space committees and also Mill Pond committee.
So Elisa, for purposes of the CPC, and I think we were still close that out. I think that's what you were responding to. Is there an intention by the Historical Commission to submit to the CPC by the beginning of January?
Yes, we have drafted the eligibility request or application. We're dealing with some delays from the Massachusetts Historical Commission because of COVID, which has delayed closeout of our current phase 2. But we do expect that to happen pretty soon, and we'd be ready to go then.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, Board of Assessors, we've got a couple of members on. If not, yeah, we've got a couple, all three. Actually, we've got all three.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. Our biggest priority is to reassess the utilities in town. There's some new opportunities to do different types of assessment for them and potentially increase, find a way to lower our taxes in town. So we would, we're requesting that money at town meeting to do that reassessment of all our utilities, National Grid and the gas company and things like that.
Rich, can I ask you,
No.
that was a item that I know we had to defer from the warrant, but something we were interested in. Have you seen whether a small community like us has there been any precedence for, say, another small community in the Commonwealth to succeed in one of these things?
Yes. The numbers we're seeing from the vendors are maybe a 3x on the investment. But it just depends.
Right, but are those like a Brockton or a Springfield, or are they are they small towns?
It's coming across the board.
Okay.
When's the last time? Archie, can I ask a question? It's Glenn.
Yes.
When's the last time they were assessed?
Well, look at it. There's an assessment every year, but it was basically the utilities report to us what their base numbers are, and we go off of that. This is actually going in and verifying what's reported to us, that it's accurate, and using the profitability they make. Say a telephone pole's been there for 40 years, it's depreciated to zero. Right now, they're not paying any tax on it, but that pole is generating revenue for the electric company, and we're looking to recapture that.
Okay.
And the other priority we have is just to find new ways of educating the taxpayers on the various opportunities for lowering their taxes. The department had done a very good job over the last 10 years doing that, but with COVID, the in-person meetings is not possible. And so we're going to look for, another priority we have is to find another way to get the word out to the taxpayers.
One piece of good news, working with the assessing office, we were in touch in the last week or so with a vendor that had given the town the proposal to do the utility valuations. And in the normal course of things, they would start their data collection in late spring. I actually said June. So if that goes forward and is funded at the annual town meeting, that can be, that would hit their time cycle really nicely to gather that data and do the report.
Yeah, we don't want to delay on this. This is money coming into the town.
Thank you.
Okay. John Dodge, you were up for Open Space Committee.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So we've got a bunch of stuff going on. The first thing is we are looking at doing an all-access trail and a meeting with the Mill Pond Committee on Wednesday night to discuss the possibilities of doing it down along Mill Pond. We would like to have our act together enough where we could apply for a grant from Mass Trails There's a February deadline for that. But again, we're still in the exploratory stage, but there's energy behind this project. We're also looking at a townwide field management plan. We've discussed this a lot with the selectmen already and with Wayne Amorel, the DPW, and some abutters who were unhappy at their fields not being mowed. But part of this is education, so we encourage native species and pollinators. We just don't sort of randomly mow down to the nub and sort of destroy some good things for the environment. So part of that is education. So that's again a discussion item. We're also we've come up with an invasives committee led by Nancy Powell, senior biologist at the Plum Island Wildlife Refuge, and part of that is in concert with the municipal vulnerability program. We've had several meetings. 3 of us on open space are on that committee, and we've discussed grant programs. We've identified about 12 invasive species, and member Jack Duggan has mapped out the biggest concentrations of Asian knotweed, which is profligate. It's everywhere, and particularly where it is along the roadside. So that's going full steam ahead. Nancy Powell could probably speak at an event like this because she's really the energy and driving force behind that. As always, we want to foster a greater trail network in town. As Rob Phillips mentioned, the trail at River Road is taking shape. It's been flagged. I've been in touch with Dave Rimmer at Greenbelt, who's leading the charge for that particular program. He says it's going to be beautiful, but there's a lot yet to happen, including an engineering plan that looks at parking and looks at doing boardwalks through conservation areas. Another thing on our radar screen is I've been working with Greenbelt also on the Artichoke River Woods project. That purchase and sale is good through June 30th. So hopefully in the first 6 months, there'll be some movement on that, and there will be a fundraising component to it, just like we had with Brown Spring and River Road. That's about it. Those are the things that we're working on. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, John.
I have a question, Archie. It's Glenn.
Go ahead.
Just so people understand, John, when you say we're working on an all-access trail at Mill Pond, what does all access mean?
Well, it means if you were in a wheelchair or if you used a walker, you'd be able to navigate this trail. There's a lot of design criteria that we have to follow, such as a grade, no more than, I think it's a 3% grade, but don't quote me on the number. Has to be 3 feet wide. It has to be hard pack. They're expensive to do, but we're hoping if you read the news today, Newburyport got a $100,000 grant from Mass Trails for a trail related to a resiliency project around its sewage plant. So we want some of that money. And anyway, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Excellent. Great program. Hopefully we can get the money for it.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
Let's see, we have a Milk Pond Committee next. Do we have anyone here on Milk Pond? Okay. Planning Board, Ray. You've been very patient, Ray.
No worries. I'm glad to see that the Planning Board's goals align with what you presented, Angus, and Board of Selectmen, particularly that whole pyramid scheme. A lot of our activity is just providing base services that pop up before us just in the course of duty. As far as our priorities are concerned, we do have some money set aside through the inclusionary housing bylaw, where money is set aside by developers when they have a partial unit, so to speak, left over. That money would be best managed by an affordable housing trust. There are existing laws in the Commonwealth that deal with affordable housing trusts. But we don't have an affordable housing trust. So we've got two lines of attack here. One is to make the existing funding that we have available to Angus, so that if something comes up, that he has some financial resources to deal with that. And then the other thing we're hoping to do is to help to establish the Affordable Housing Trust in town. There seems to be enough political will right now to put one together. And it's not an incredibly hard lift because there's so many affordable housing trusts in small communities and towns around Massachusetts. So Leah's been working with Angus on that, and we have some regulations pending that'll help with that. We're winding up Sullivan's Court and what's been going on down there in a development. We have $10,000 in seed money, which we're going to put in a fund for establishing a trail that would be an all-access trail between River Meadows Drive and Sullivan's Court. The land is there, the place is there. Concom is aware of it. So maybe with that seed money, that trail could be built. Right now, people are using the trail, and with the trail as it exists now, it's not good for the environment, and it's not good for the town because somebody could get hurt on that trail. Of course, we've got 519 Main Street. 519 Main Street is across from Long Hill Orchard, and that's a pending development. We're working on our scenic roads. There are bylaws in place. People are coming before us now because Angus and Wayne have their act together, and we're getting our act together. We need to set up some regulations about how we deal with stone walls and public shade trees, and we're hoping to work with the tree committee and the Concom on establishing some guidelines for making decisions at the planning board when we have those public hearings. We want to continue to improve and modernize the bylaws. We don't always want to be passive on this. A lot of the bylaws, the language is confusing or ambiguous. So we're hoping to clean that up. So those are our short-term priorities, other than maintaining and reacting to the service that we're required to do by law.
Thank you, Ray.
You bet.
Hey, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I talk a sec? Hey, just wanted to say Ray brought up one of the points of the trail that goes from River Meadow Drive over to Sullivan's Court. I just want you to know we've tried to stop some things that are happening in there. First of all, the ground really does get eaten up. It's running through I'd say a little stream area, and it's disturbed and it really needs to be taken care of. Secondly, that's a town-owned piece of property that the neighborhood is now, some people in the neighborhood have made a dumping area, and it's really bad in there to keep it cleared. We're even moving trees and stuff. They dump trees and leaves and things in there, and it's on town property because it's convenient for them. So as they're working with those trails, maybe somehow we can work it out that stops in there. Where the trails are going to go are probably right over our water main. So we really want to be in touch with the trails people and what they're going to be doing there, so that if anything ever happened to those water mains, that we would have access to them. Thank you.
Mike, so the water main currently runs through that parcel connecting?
Right where the trail is.
Ah, I didn't realize that. Okay.
And it connects to Sullivan's Court and Fallensby.
And where's the dumping happening? On which side? Is it happening on the Fallensby side or
the River Meadow side?
I'm sorry, say again, the River Meadow side? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah, we're aware of where the water line is, and the trail where it's been designed is not going to be on top of it. And we also realize you don't want any permanent boardwalk structures on top of the line. So we have a proposed location of the trail, and it's more to the right of where the water line is. And we're also aware of the dumping that was discussed at a Concom meeting a couple meetings ago, and we're working with Wayne to get a posting there, no dumping, and also to put some rocks along to prevent people from backing their trucks up and unloading. I think it's the landscapers in that neighborhood that are doing it. That would be the most generous
Yeah.
conclusion. But
Yeah.
but yeah, we're aware of that. So thanks.
Ray has a comment.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. The planning board doesn't view the creation of the boardwalk and trail as the planning board's purview. Our job was to secure some funding and make sure that there are proper rights of way or easements in the area. We've been frustrated by a developer. The $10,000 was originally our idea for creating a trail. At that time, we didn't know it needed to be ADA compliant. Wendy and the Concom have been incredibly patient with the developer, who fell a little short of what we hoped for that whole endeavor. So that's where the $10,000 comes from. I think it's a great project. I think it's going to be used by public a great deal. Once the trail is formally established, I think the dumping will slow down. But yeah, it's up to some other town entity or group that gets together that would then look for perhaps additional funding through some grant, and then and bring this one across the goal line.
Good.
Thank you all. And this is great, because this is what we're wanting to do. People with different little aspects on the same issue now hearing each other, and we're solving the problem in a small way. It's great. Who's next, Angus?
Had the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Working Group. I know Elisa was on, and I'm sorry that this came up after. I think it looks like she's off. Rick, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Actually, there were a couple of things that the MVP working group were interested in, and each of them involve other boards or committees. I guess the first would be along the lines of addressing invasives. The MVP working group was interested in potentially funding a couple of, probably two high school student interns next summer, and we're thinking that it would be appropriate to put an article on the town meeting warrant to work with specific species, invasive species, to identify and do some work towards control, ideally eradication ultimately. So there are multiple benefits besides, potentially controlling certain species, probably shooting for the knotweed. I think that's where we had focused on. Wendy, you might actually have some recollection about this as well. The idea would be to build public awareness at the same time, so that people can address things on their own property and be aware of what's going on town property, while we are, actually controlling an invasive problem. There are numerous species around town. Some of them are pretty much out of control. Bittersweet and multiflora rose probably, maybe be the two worst offenders. But this is a start. Again, a lot of it is just going to be education of homeowners and residents. The second idea would be working with the Energy Advisory Committee on. We've been trying to figure out, or we were debating what it might be called. Would it be called an energy and environmental fair, or would it just be called a green fair, or a green expo? And ideally, it would cover as broad a range of topics as possible relative to local environmental issues, and could involve and energy, and how they all tie together, and would ideally incorporate interest from other boards and committees. For instance, open space, perhaps planning board, certainly Concom. So those were the two ideas that the MVP working group were thinking of. Anybody have questions?
The MVP working group is scheduled to give a more thorough presentation next week, a week from tonight at the Selectmen's meeting. That's been on the books for a little while now.
Can I just ask one question about the invasive species? And I live over on Indian Hill, and the knotweed is completely out of control. But based on everything I know about that, it's not going anywhere. So how let's say you have these high school interns and they do research, like how does the town actually plan on eradicating that or controlling it? It seems like it's fairly uncontrollable.
Yeah, so Allison, I can't give you a really comprehensive answer, but I can kind of give you a thumbnail sketch. First off, Jack Dugan had identified, he spent some time with a handful of other people identifying every location they could find in town with knotweed, and sort of classifying them based on size and how other characteristics to do with the particular area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some areas where they're small enough that we should be able to relatively easily control them.
Okay.
There are other areas, such as probably where you're describing, that control is a much broader issue. And so, part of the issue is for people to understand how to avoid spreading it further. There are actions that people can take to avoid making the problem worse.
Yeah.
Or to avoid, new invasions. But it's going to be a long, ongoing process trying to reel things in where we can, and in some cases we probably, with certain plants it may be a lost cause. I mean, there may be no way. They're so broadly spread around town that there may be no way to really get a handle on them.
Yeah. Okay. It's a conversation for another time, but thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you want to sit in with that group at some point, that'd be great. Or if you want to participate in any way, that would be fantastic. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, we do have a number of other committees that exist on paper that we don't have reps for here tonight. What I'd like to do, or I'd suggest, Archie, is the one that we don't have a rep, but that did submit some written materials, is the Park and Rec Commission. And I did attend their meeting Thursday night. If you want, I could give just a thumbnail of their.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so there's been a lot of changes in the Park and Rec Commission in the last year. Tom Flaherty stepped down after many, many years as chair and really running things over there. So Jack Foley, who's been on the commission for a couple of years, became chair last winter. And since that time, there was an election with 2 new commissioners seated. So it's a brand new group, and they have had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings since the election. So I'll just summarize what Jack had submitted on their behalf. So the first is to develop a field use fee schedule that's then made available on the town website based on a user group tiered fee schedule. The goal is to have fees be predictable, as well as to generate more fees from field use. And we all should know this is kind of in the pre and post COVID world. Obviously, field utilization this past couple of sports seasons hasn't been what it would be in a typical year. But the idea is to have a tiered fee based on the type of user group that would basically be equitable with the various groups that have interest in use of the fields. The second is to develop a better understanding of the summer rec program operations. The town for many years runs a summer rec program, and the commission is kind of ostensibly oversees that, but there's been a fair amount of independence between the program administrators and the commission. The program's been terrifically successful, but the elected commission is kind of in charge of that. And with the turnover and new people on the commission, they want to become more hands-on with that, including enrollment, staffing, fee structure, costs and revenues, programming, advertisement, and so forth. So there's a lot of very nuts and bolts work that the commission wants to gain a greater familiarity with. Third item they had is to develop short-term and long-term capital improvement schedule for park and rec assets, which have a useful life, meeting capital. So that would include Action Cove, Page softball, Bachelor Street fields, Babe Ruth baseball. The fourth is to develop a realistic budget for FY22. The commission has a somewhat complex financial structure with a combination of operating funds, revolving funds, gift account, as well as some grant funds that have been on the books for a number of years. So coming up with an operating budget that reflects what's needed from budget as opposed to other revenue sources there's some complexity there. The fifth item they had is to develop better alignment between the pipe stave mill pond management plan requirements and what actually happens in practice. There's some things that have been in that management plan for coming up on 20 years that in practice haven't really happened. And so I think there's an interest in looking at what the plan says and either bring actions into conformance with the plan or amending the plan to better reflect actual practice if that's what makes more sense. But there's an acknowledgement that there's a disconnect there, which I think is good. And then finally, to develop better collaboration with the Council on Aging is a stated objective of the Park and Rec Commission.
Okay.
Great. So of those that didn't speak, we do have, let's see, well, I referred to the Mill Pond Committee, the Zoning Board of Appeals. They updated their 40B regs comprehensively right toward the end of last fiscal year. So they've gotten a lot done. The Harbor Committee did do a preliminary feasibility study of a potential mooring field, and they did put in an article request early fall for additional funding to take that study to the next stage. It did not go to the fall town meeting, but I would expect the Harbor Committee would propose funding for the next town meeting. So I've encouraged them to appear before the Selectmen to present the study that was done last summer, so there can be broader understanding of that. And when the time comes, when that is scheduled, obviously we want to make sure that, other groups, River Access Committee, Open Space Committee, Park and Rec Commission, all get notice so everyone can learn about what they've been looking at as a potential mooring field. Historic District Commission and Council on Aging. And so I think that pretty well covers the universe, the local universe.
I see Sam Jocelyn's here. Did he just here to talk, or did he want to?
Well, I had sent out to department heads an invitation to submit projects they're working on, and Sam did submit, the considerable list of what his department's working on. Sam, are you still with us? Do you want to speak to that? I had given every department, every staff person the opportunity to sit in, but because of the time constraints, I hadn't assumed there would be presentation opportunity for departments. So I think Sam's been here primarily to learn, but do you want to summarize your memo?
That's cool.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I was still awake, so it's all good. So I did submit a list of just some stuff I did want the board to be aware of. Coffin Street, the 40B, obviously you guys are aware of. Joan, our admin,
and I have been working on a central database or a repository for any forms coming in, assuming that they do apply. The PSRD is moving along really well. They've been fantastic to work with, so I'm hoping that continues throughout the winter.
And by that, you mean the new middle high school?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just have it on my notes, but yes. They got all the concrete's in 100%. The steel work's about 80. They're flying. They're doing a great job too. So and all the people that are there representing us, just are nice people, easy to work with, and really very knowledgeable. So one of my big concerns was being confident in the team that's there. When I took the position, I'm very confident in them. So that really is nice. The floodplain bylaw, the National Flood Insurance Program, dictated we update our language. So that's been rewritten and submitted to the planning board for review, and hopefully we'll move that forward for possibly Springtown meeting. As you guys know, you approved the submission of an ADA grant. I think it was back in October. We should have an answer by the end of the month. I'm hoping it's a good answer, but that will help us do our self-evaluation of our town buildings and facilities. And as Ray Cook had mentioned about reorganizing zoning, I have been working on reorganizing our current bylaw into an easier, more, I guess, a better flow format. I've been talking with Leah about that, and it's something I did in Newbury and then also in Groveland. And then the intent is to get General Code's E-code involved, so we have an online format that makes it much easier for us to go in and plug and play and fix all the problems that Ray was mentioning. Because there's a lot. I mean, you can tell that there's been a lot of updates over the years. Some of the sites in there don't even go to the sites that exist anymore, or they're just, it's nonsensical when you read it. There's a lot to be done there, and I talked to Leah about the E-code too, and she thinks that would be a fantastic tool for us to have, and it's fairly inexpensive. And then the procedure we've done in the other towns is to just peck away at priority pieces and eventually work through the bylaw. And it's been very well received at town meeting. Rather than trying to go in with a whole new bylaw, just go with one that's reorganized and then pick and choose kind of your top items and some low-hanging fruit each year to get that done. So it's it's work in progress. It's been a little tougher. I wish I had more face-to-face with Leah, but we're still communicating, emailing, and hopefully at some point I'll actually get to meet the planning board, not just in little 1-inch thumbnail size people. So.
One thing that I hope is going to be part of new and improved zoning bylaw is a table of use regulations.
Yes,
that's a glaring deficiency.
Yep, there's a current placeholder for it. The first phase or step that because people get upset when you start changing uses, is to just get it in order, get a placeholder there for it. And one of the first things we did in both communities was, addressed a massive use table to really refine and define what can and can't be done in town.
That was one of the issues that came up on this meeting we had today that Mike Gute was part of, and Leah as well, on this potential of a surface water protection bylaw. Newburyport's got Ty and Bond working, and they've offered their consulting support to help us, and which is great. But as we were unraveling for them a little bit of the complexity that we have, for instance, if we did do a new surface water protection bylaw and it had new allowances or restrictions on what could or couldn't happen in certain districts, and when we explained to them, we don't have a table of use regs. So if that's just a narrative form, you know, and then the town planner and anyone building a house has to, on top of the existing regulations, now read this new one. It's just, it's just this layers of complexity. So, you know, it became clear to them what we all know, which is that we need, in order to reform our bylaw in a meaningful way, we need to have a starting place that you can at least understand what you're talking about. So I'm glad that you're working on that.
Yeah, as the guy that's enforcing it, it's challenging to try and make sense of it all. So it's gives me some incentive to work on it.
Any questions for Sam?
That was good, Sam. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ray it looks like Ray had a comment, question.
Oh, my comment is just apologies, but I have to get going. But good talking to you all. I think it's a good.
Dinner ready?
What's that?
Dinner ready?
No, but there are health issues here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. So I'm going to take off, but good talking to you all.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks,
Ray, very much.
Thanks, Ray. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. And, you know, next week, a week from tonight, the board's going to be reviewing and presumably adopting its kind of policy direction for the FY22 budget. You know, I've been telling people informally this meeting tonight is not the end all be all. It's not like this is people's last chance to speak now or forever hold your peace, but the intent was to hear people's kind of top line priorities. And at least for me, I think this has been really helpful. I don't know, Archie, do you want to get into board discussion tonight, or do you want to do that a week from tonight, since, or however you want to handle it?
I think a week from tonight, we sort of have to digest all the things we've heard, I think.
I think that's important because, and we're going to get written form of some people that weren't in attendance, correct, Archie? I mean,
Yeah.
excuse me, Angus?
That's right. Yeah, we did get, yes, you know, from your board packet, you know, we got a handful of submittals. I know we'll get more. And then, you know, I'll be working with Jenny this week to write up what we've heard tonight. So we have, you know, not a, you know, big comprehensive thing, but we'll do a succinct report of what's been talked about. And I think
Angus, could you, because now we're heading, you know, we want to give a budget message. So the one thing I would say is a lot of the things that people were focusing on were not necessarily had a dollar figure on them. A lot of them were policies and plans that weren't necessarily budget effectors, but a few were. So if the new initiatives that would be budgetary, I think we should, because we're focusing on the budget right at the moment. That's what I think. I think we should, you know, look at them. And there was probably maybe 6 or 8 of them that were mentioned. Because some of these things are not dollar figures. They're just time issues. So I would say if we can have, especially for next week, just we all think of the things that people said that were related to how it would actually, that they were going to need changes to the budget, then that's really important. Okay.
Yeah, and changes to the budget in our next fiscal, like the library presentation. So we just get those type of things clear. They just said a lot of good things, but I think when Wendy said it, she said, if we weren't in COVID, we would do this, do that, do this. So does that mean, is that going to be in the budget, or is it not going to be in the budget? You know what I mean by that? So just to make sure we
point. Yeah, I mean,
so we clear those things up.
That's one of the things is, how do we know? That's one thing nobody knows.
Yeah, exactly. But I was just using that as an example. She put a lot of good initiatives there that they wanted to do, but is it really going to happen? You know what I mean? So that would help us also.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. Good turnout. We didn't run too long. Not too many people fell asleep, so it's good. And I think the town needs to do this, so that people know what everybody else is doing. I really think it's helpful. Hopefully it will be. Thank you all.
Any closing comments anyone has?
Thanks to everybody who came. This is very, very helpful for me. And I'm glad it happened. It was like what Archie said. He's been saying this for a couple of years. Get around a big, huge table and just kind of talk on one day on a Saturday morning and just everybody have a good understanding of what's really going on in the town. So it happened, but I think this might be a good thing to do annually going forward.
And doing it like this may actually be more easy than sitting around a big, huge table. Oddly enough, maybe a positive outcome from those.
It's easier to get people to be quiet. Yeah.
I'll take that as advice. Thank you. No, I'll take that as constructive criticism. That's what I probably should say.
All right.
Thank Jenny for.
Do we want to vote on we had a minutes? Do we want to do that?
Yeah, it'd be good to just knock that. But Mike, you were saying, thank Jenny.
Yeah,
warranted.
Yeah, she's going to have a lot of work to be printing up and doing the minutes on this thing.
I don't want to read the minutes on this.
We'll do bullet points. We got some good notes. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have minutes from the last meeting. If the board wants to take those up, just to check that off the list.
I'll be honest.
I'll see you later, guys.
Okay, if you haven't read them, we'll put them on for next week. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm with Rick. I didn't look them over.
Okay, all right. We'll just put those on for next week. No worries.
I didn't think that was going to be part of it.
All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye, Kep Ryan.
And aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Night, everyone. Bye.